At 53, I had become an expert at living quietly. My days moved in predictable rhythms: volunteer work at the community center, weekly grocery runs, book club meetings where we discussed novels about other people's adventures. I had crafted a life of gentle routines after my divorce, then found companionship with David, a steady man whose grown daughter visited monthly and whose presence filled the house with comfortable silence rather than passion. I believed this was enough. I had convinced myself that the electric feelings of youth were meant to fade, replaced by something more sensible, more sustainable. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it, when you've grown most comfortable in your carefully constructed world. The disruption came on a Tuesday in early May, when the late afternoon light had that golden quality that makes everything look softer, more forgiving. I was arranging fresh peonies from the garden, lost in thought about nothing particularly important, when I heard footsteps on the hardwood behind me. Helen? The voice belonged to Marcus, David's son, though I hadn't realized he was visiting. Could you help me with something? I turned to find him standing in the doorway, looking somewhat helpless as he held up a burgundy necktie. At 28, he had his father's height but carried himself with less certainty, more openness. We had maintained a cordial distance over the years, polite but not particularly close. Of course, I said, setting down the flowers and wiping my hands on my apron. Come here. He approached, and I reached up to straighten his shirt collar. There was something different about being this close to him. The faint scent of his cologne. Something crisp and clean that reminded me of autumn. Mornings. My fingers worked the silk of the tie with practiced ease, the way I once had for my ex-husband during his corporate days. My father never showed me this, Marcus said, looking down as I worked. He always preferred the clip-on variety. I smiled, concentrating on the knot. David's always been practical about these things. You have gentle hands, he said quietly. The words hung in the air between us, innocent enough but somehow weighted with meaning I wasn't prepared for. I finished adjusting the tie and stepped back, suddenly very aware of the space between us. There, I said, smoothing the silk against his chest. Perfect for whatever the occasion is. Job interview, he explained. Nothing major, just a marketing position downtown, but I figured I should look professional. I nodded, turning back to my flowers to give my hands something to do. You'll do wonderfully. I have faith in you. You always say that, he observed, and when I glanced back, he was studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It's always true, I replied. He lingered for a moment longer, as if there were more to say, then cleared his throat. I should go. Don't want to make a poor first impression by being late. Good luck, Marcus. After he left, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by the sweet fragrance of peonies, wondering why my pulse felt unsteady. Nothing inappropriate had happened, just a simple favor, the kind any reasonable person would do. Yet something had shifted. In that brief interaction, some door had opened that I hadn't even realized was there. The house felt different in his absence, charged with an energy I couldn't name. I found myself moving restlessly from room to room, straightening things that didn't need straightening, my mind returning again and again to the warmth in his voice, the way he had looked at me as if truly seeing me. That evening, while David was at his weekly poker game, I received a text message from Marcus. Interview went well, thanks to your help. I think they liked me. I stared at the message longer than necessary before responding. I'm so pleased. They'd be lucky to have someone like you. His reply came quickly. That means more than you know. I set the phone aside, unsettled by how much his words affected me. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the back deck, letting the cool evening air clear my head. But even as I tried to rationalize away the afternoon's strange intensity, I knew something fundamental had changed. The next morning brought another unexpected encounter. I was folding laundry when I heard the front door open, followed by Marcus's voice calling my name. I found him in the entryway looking slightly disheveled, his interview clothes replaced by jeans and a sweater. I left my phone charger. He explained, holding up the white cord. Thought I might need it if I stayed over again. Of course, I said. Would you like some tea? I was just making a pot. He hesitated, then nodded. That would be nice. In the kitchen, I went through the familiar motions of preparing tea while he sat at the small table by the window. The morning light caught the auburn threads in his dark hair, and I found myself noticing details I'd never observed before. The way his fingers drummed absently on the table, the thoughtful expression he wore when he believed no one was watching. I heard, "Back from them," he said as I set a cup before him. "They offered me the position." "Marcus, that's wonderful." I sat across from him, genuinely pleased. "When do you start?" "Next Monday." He took a sip of tea, then looked directly at me. "You know, you're easy to talk to. I don't think I've ever really noticed that before." "Am I?" The question surprised me. You listen without trying to fix everything or offer advice before understanding the problem. It's rare. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I suppose I've learned the value of listening over the years. "I used to think of you as just my father's partner," he admitted. "Someone pleasant who happened to share his life. But lately..." He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "Lately what?" I asked softly. He met my eyes. "Lately, I see you differently, as your own person, not defined by your relationship to him. Does that make sense?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The air between us seemed to thicken, filled with unspoken understanding. "I should probably go," he said finally, though he made no move to leave. "Yes," I agreed, though I made no move to end our conversation either. We sat in that suspended moment, both of us aware that something was happening, but neither brave enough to name it. Eventually, he stood and carried his cup to the sink. "Thank you for the tea. And for listening. Congratulations again on the job." He paused at the kitchen doorway. "Helen?" "Yes? I hope we can talk like this again sometime." After he left, I remained at the table, staring at the place where he had sat, trying to understand what was happening to me. I was a woman who had always colored within the lines, who understood boundaries and respected them. Yet here I was, heart racing over a conversation that had been perfectly innocent on the surface while carrying dangerous undercurrents beneath. The following days passed in a haze of attempted normalcy. I threw myself into spring cleaning with unusual vigor, scrubbing baseboards and organizing closets as if physical activity could quiet the confusion in my mind. But no amount of busy work could erase the memory of Marcus's words, or the way he had looked at me as if I were someone worth seeing. David returned from his business trip on Thursday, full of stories about client meetings and delayed flights. I listened and responded appropriately, playing the part of the supportive partner I had always been. Yet I found myself studying his face, searching for signs that he saw me the way Marcus had, not as an extension of our shared life, but as a complete person with her own depths and complexities. The test came Saturday evening. We were having dinner at home, a quiet meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, when David mentioned his son casually. "Marcus got that job he interviewed for," he said, cutting into his chicken. "Seems pleased about it." "That's wonderful," I replied, proud that my voice remained steady. "Good kid," David continued. "I'm glad you two get along. Makes things easier." I nodded, taking a sip of wine to cover my silence. If only he knew how complicated getting along had become. Later that night, unable to sleep, I slipped out to the garden. The night air was warm for May, carrying the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's fence. I had just settled on the old wooden bench when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. My heart knew who it was before my eyes confirmed it. Marcus emerged from the shadows, looking uncertain and slightly out of breath. "I saw your light on," he said. I couldn't sleep either. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, though there was no anger in my voice. "I know." He sat beside me on the bench, careful to maintain distance between us. But I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation the other day. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us staring up at the star-scattered sky. The night seemed to encourage honesty, to make secrets feel safer. "Can I tell you something?" he asked finally. I nodded. "I haven't felt this comfortable with anyone in a long time. There's something about you that makes me feel like I can be myself without pretending or performing." "I understand," I said quietly. You make me feel seen in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The admission hung between us, dangerous and beautiful. Neither of us moved to close the physical distance between us, but the emotional space had already collapsed. "What are we doing?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know it feels more real than anything I've experienced in years." We talked until nearly dawn, sharing stories from our past, dreams for our future, fears we'd never voiced aloud. It was the kind of conversation that creates intimacy without physical touch, that builds connection through understanding rather than proximity. As the sky began to lighten, I knew our time was ending. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Yes." "Will you be all right?" I looked at this young man who had awakened something in me I thought was permanently dormant. "I think so. For the first time in years, I feel truly alive." He stood slowly. "Helen?" "Yes?" "Thank you for reminding me that connections like this are possible, even if we can't pursue it." "Thank you for seeing me," I replied. He walked away, into the early morning light, and I remained on the bench until the sun was fully up. When I finally went inside, David was still sleeping peacefully, unaware that his partner had spent the night discovering parts of herself she'd thought were lost forever. I didn't feel guilty, though perhaps I should have. I felt grateful for the reminder that I was still capable of deep feeling, still worthy of being truly seen and understood. Marcus had given me a gift without meaning to, had shown me that the woman I used to be wasn't gone, just sleeping. Over the following weeks, our paths crossed occasionally, brief encounters at family gatherings, polite conversations when he visited his father. We maintained appropriate boundaries, but there was an understanding between us now, a recognition of what we had shared and what we had chosen not to pursue. Months later, I would look back on that spring as the season I rediscovered myself. Not through dramatic action or life-changing decisions, but through the simple recognition that I was still here, still capable of connection, still worthy of being seen. Sometimes the most profound awakenings come not from what we do, but from what we allow ourselves to feel. The woman who had arranged peonies in her kitchen that Tuesday afternoon was gone, replaced by someone who understood that being truly alive sometimes means acknowledging desires we cannot or should not fulfill. It was a hard-won wisdom, born from the space between what we want and what we choose, between the people we are and the people we allow ourselves to become. I never saw Marcus in quite the same way again, nor he me. But we had given each other something invaluable, proof that we were both still capable of profound connection, still deserving of being fully seen. In the end, perhaps that was enough.